Hello, this is a test. Let's see if the audio is working. And I see somebody is viewing me already. If so, if that person would say hello and see if they can hear me, that'd be useful. And we're about 4 minutes from the start. Hello, viewer. If it says I have a viewer. If you can hear me, please let me know so that I can adjust the audio. I'm not going to have if I'm too low or too high or clipping or whatever. Are you there? Okay. And we'll get started when we have enough viewers and when we get to the top of the hour. And feel free to let us know where you're coming in from tonight. Hello, viewers. Anybody out there? Can anybody hear me? I'm always concerned that I'm not being heard, so I want to make certain that I am. Also, I'm going to adjust my lighting slightly. And we're now about a minute and a bit from getting started. Hello, folks. Are you out there? You should be able to talk on the chat. And by the way, Merry Christmas season to you. Hope you're doing well. And okay. Going to go ahead and go at the top of the hour. Okay. So, hello, I'm Ann Ogborn, and this is Transrescue's presentation for getting out of the United States. We run this same presentation about once a week, just to make certain everybody's gotten access to it. Transrescue is the Dutch foundation. We get transgender people out of dangerous spaces. To date, we've gotten over 150 people out of all of the countries that are in green. Our message today is that you can indeed get out. We have confidence that every person who works in a business-like way at it can indeed get out. This session is to help you do just that. So you're going to need a plan in order to get out. And you're actually probably going to need several. You will need, at the very least, a plan for what to do if things suddenly go bad. You should have a bug-out bag and a passport and some plan to execute if there's an immediate disaster. This is an example of a family with a trans member, and their plan is they live in Southern California, so their plan is that they will just drive to Mexico if it's an emergency. And everyone in the family has a passport, and they'll have bug-out bags packed and so on. In a little more controlled way, they are selling off all their property. They've sold the RV and the boat, and they're selling off whatever else. And it's now mid-December. This was written a month or two ago. If they make a decision about whether to try and get out before the election. If they decide that they will, then their plan is they'll all go to Europe. They're going to backpack around and look for work. If not, then their plan is that they'll interview remotely and let their one of the kids is about ready to finish school, so they want to let that person finish the semester, and they think if they give their company a little time, they can get a transfer to their EU office. Okay, anybody out there with questions? All right, so those are certainly two scenarios you want to cover are an immediate bug out and kind of what is the best way to exit. And then you may need a third one of, well, what if I have to do it quicker, but not in an overnight emergency? The first step of every plan is going to be a passport, getting a passport. And to get a passport, by the way, is there anybody out there? It shows that I've got one person watching me at the moment. Anybody there? Hello. It says I've got a person watching, but if I don't hear from you soon, I may decide that nobody showed up tonight and cancel. Okay. I'm going to keep talking for the moment. So first step is to get a passport. We have a detailed guide on the website about how to get a passport, and I really recommend you go to there. There are some details about getting a passport. There are also some questions. One is, should you get a passport renewed right now? And honestly, as we get closer to the election, this might not be the best moment to do that. You actually might be better off doing that later in February after you see what the lay of the land is. Because we think there's going to be a lot of stuff go down those first week. Whether to get an X on a passport, that's a really personal decision, but do be aware that there are some places you cannot go with an X passport, and it is going to mark you as being trans. Finally, if you're in the middle of changing your documents, we recommend that everybody have a passport in some name rather than fiddling around waiting for to change their gender documents. Again, that might depend on, honestly, all of these things depend on what you think is going to happen. Next step is going to be to, hey, and I'm not getting anybody giving me feedback. So unless somebody convinces me there's actually somebody to listen to me, I am going to decide that this isn't happening tonight. So please say something. We dropped down to 0, but now we're back. So I'm going to see if that person says hello. Hey, if you're out there, say hello, because I'm about to decide that nobody wanted to spend their Saturday before Christmas listening to me talk. Okay, I'm not getting any response. I think I'm going to call this then. Thank you, anybody who is out there, but I'm not hearing from you, so I don't realize you're there. So I am ending this. Oh, hey, Sandy. Hi. You came in just under the wire. I was reaching for the button. Hi, Sandy. As long as you're here, I'm happy to keep going. But I thought I was talking to myself, and I wasn't going to do that. Okay, so the next step is to get kind of emotionally and interpersonally ready to leave. Sandy, where are you coming in from? Where are you tonight? I'm in Enschede, Holland. I'm in the Netherlands. I'm not really in Holland, but I'm in the Netherlands. In the U.S., yes, well, I sort of assumed you were in the U.S. In a red state, blue state, and more than happy to kind of tailor this to what your situation is. So the more you tell me, the more I'll tailor this to you. Okay. Next step is a bunch of interpersonal stuff. You or I almost certainly either going to be more or less anxious to go. A purple state. You're almost certain to be more or less anxious to go than your partner. I have talked to many trans couples where one person was very anxious to get out and the other person was not at all convinced. And I think every plan has to basically come down to what you think might happen, which is just that it's might happen, not will happen. So you may have parents you're taking care of. We put out a little video once about somebody who was trans and concerned about leaving because they were taking care of their elderly mother. There are a couple of things you can do to kind of get over these issues. Obviously, talking with people. You may just not be very comfortable with the idea of leaving the United States because you've never been outside. It's a little intimidating. Watching some travel videos can help. I discourage the kind of changer travel type things. Some videos depend on, hey, we got a second person. Hello, second person. Wherever you're coming in from, say hello and say where you're from. But you may never have left the United States. It's not uncommon in the U.S. And if so, the world may seem like kind of an unknown place. So watch some videos, sort of great German food. And maybe you'll find out that Germany's not so scary a place. Another thing is kind of accept that there is going to be some pain associated with this. Don't be stuck because you are convinced that you're looking for a completely painless method of getting out. And at the same time, be aware this can be a fun adventure. Talk to somebody from the U.S. who's made it here to the Netherlands today, and he's kind of excited to be seeing Europe, and I think it's a good attitude. Okay, I'm gonna go over, this is basically my outline for the rest of the talk. This is ways to get out, and we'll talk about all of these. You talk about kind of normal immigration, ways to, and then we'll talk about something called a rentista visa that lets you work in someplace and work remotely. We'll talk about ways, there are some practical ways to get citizenship, and then we'll talk about the idea of being kind of a perpetual traveler. There are lots of good ways to get to basically knock around and become one of the many hundreds of thousands of people who are just enjoying life and traveling around. We'll talk about ways of not quite leaving the United States, but effectively getting out by living near a border. And then we'll talk about some ways that don't work. So, can you please elaborate on perpetual travel? Sure, I can. So the idea is that as an American, your passport will let you travel to almost any country, quite often for a fairly long period of time, like 6 months. There are hundreds of thousands of people, mostly Europeans and Americans, traveling around and just kind of always being on the road. You can do that. You can always just get out of the U.S. by going probably to someplace inexpensive, like Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Philippines, those kinds of places, and hanging out. And there's a program called, tell you what, I'm going to go forward a bit. There's a program called workaway.info and a program called Woofing. Workaway is Woofing is willing workers on organic farms. You basically go to an organic farm and you learn about sustainable farming. You do farm work for 3 to 5 hours a day, and in return you are given food and housing. Workaway.info does the same kind of thing, but has a wider variety of things they do. They don't just do organic farming. So you might find yourself caring for the elderly in a nonprofit somewhere, or helping with the social media program for a nonprofit somewhere, or helping to organize workers, or almost anything like that. It can vary from a fairly commercial, here is a bed and food in return for this much work, to being pretty cool kind of collaborative situations. Many places, after you go, you must be gone for a certain period of time. But, for example, for the Schengen area, which is most of Europe, that you can remain for 90 days, and then you must leave for 90 days, and then you can come back, and you can do that forever. So, for example, you can go to the UK for 90 days, or go to Ireland, or go to one of the non-Schengen Eastern European countries, or Malta, or almost any of those places. And you have to realize, in many places in the world, living is cheap. The average income in the Philippines is $440 a month. And so if you can, especially if you can figure out something that gets some income, and this could be the kind of income that in other circumstances might be just like, oh, making my hobby pay type things. You can come very close to living on it. I used to be active in Second Life when that was more of a thing, and made some things in Second Life and sold them, and I still get about $35 a month just out of that stuff. But if you can find some way of working online, or do some kind of craft project, then certainly you can. Then you can go a long way toward making a living anywhere. So what other questions you have about perpetual travel? And hello, new viewers. I see we've got more viewers now. So I'm going to go back and cover the things I skipped. Okay. All right. So, simple way, find work overseas. To work online, do you need a digital nomad visa? No, not necessarily. If you don't care about the fact that you are going to have to move on after 9 months or so, just retain your U.S. bank account and have people pay you in the U.S. To be honest, many places that are these kinds of tourist havens, they don't care if you sit and work on your laptop in a cafe in Manila, and then have money come from home, as long as you're not there taking a job away from a local. But You don't need a digital nomad visa. What a digital nomad visa gets you is some level of security. You'll be able to do things like register for electricity, rent a home, use the public cell service. You're not traveling so much. Digital. Is it safe to use Wi-Fi in another country? Yes. Get a VPN. Get a VPN and use it. Do not use the free VPNs. Use one that you have to pay a little for. Use the same kind of security that you would use here. I don't think the Wi-Fi is any more dangerous in another country than it is here. Do be a little cautious in what you send if you are, for example, in a cafe and using their Wi-Fi, but that's true anywhere. I think as long as you use the same kind of consideration you use here, you'll be fine. And obviously, I wouldn't recommend traveling to any place that what you say on the VPN or what you say on the Wi-Fi might get you in trouble. But if you do choose to go to such a place, then take appropriate precautions. Yeah, I think it's fine. And quite often other countries have better internet than the United States. The U.S. Adopted its infrastructure fairly early. Countries that adopted it later adopted better infrastructure. If you have some amount of savings, you may not need to work at all. You may just be able to move someplace inexpensive and retire, even if you're in your 40s or whatever. Retirement type visas are quite useful. Let's see. By the way, when you're thinking about this kind of thing, working online is the obvious one, but doing some kind of craft skill and shipping boxes of stuff to somebody to be sold. Do websites, they may or they may not. English is widely distributed. My experience is that many countries, English will get you by quite a long time. The governments tend to want to kind of preserve their national identity, and they quite often are in the local language. Hey, Rich. Okay, Rich says, I did very poorly in the latter year of school due to emotional issues. Still haven't finished it despite being 18 now. I have a plan to finish it quickly, but it starts on the 6th. Everything I've been told and seen myself is that I need to finish school to do basically anything when moving. That's a debate, is whether to stay and finish your school. The truth is that your education may become less important, in particularly, honestly, a high school diploma. It's not like they're likely to check and see if you have a high school diploma when getting a job overseas that you can get with a high school diploma. For example, you probably want that high school diploma if you're going to, for example, teach English as a second language. That you would require a college degree for. An au pair situation might work for you. This is a program that many countries have. You come and basically take care of somebody's kid and clean their house. And in return, you're allowed to be in the country. You get food and accommodation and some relatively small salary. For example, in the Netherlands, it's $350 a month. And then you work some number of hours a day taking care of things. It can be a little bit hard, but it does give you a chance to be someplace. On the other hand, if you're in that situation, starting out as if you think there's a chance, if you come to Germany, you may find it difficult to find somebody who's willing to go through the incredible hassle of a visa for somebody getting a burger flipper type job. On the other hand, what you might do is come here and try like a woofing position or a workaway.info position, and then see if you can make that transition into paid work. If you believe there's a chance you can get German citizenship based on your ancestry, you should write an email and put citizenship consult in the heading, and I will put you in touch with our citizenship specialist who can let you know whether that's realistic and what you need to do in order to get it. No. But if you are in your last year of high school, I would say, I personally, what I would do is I would have a bug-out bag packed. I would certainly have a passport, and then I would kind of keep a weather eye watchful on conditions and decide whether you need to get out quickly. If you do, then try and have enough set aside to get yourself out of the country. Just physically to get somewhere. As a young person, there's lots of kind of educational programs and so on you can get yourself involved in that will take you to someplace else. Great. I'm very glad you got a passport. Everybody should have a passport. Okay. If you have, let's see. Sounds like neither of you have a passport. So I'm going to be pretty short on this. The DAFT Treaty, or neither of you have a degree. The DAFT Treaty, you have to have a degree or otherwise demonstrate you're a highly skilled worker. But then you can basically set up a consultancy in the Netherlands and get a... However, you both might be interested in this one. If you can demonstrate that you've been making a if you have some skill that you can make a remote living, first of all, you can just go somewhere on a tourist visa, and especially if you can find, for example, someone who will informally rent to you, which is you usually can, then you can get you can continue to work remotely, and quite often living is cheap in many places. So if you'd like a little more permanent solution, you can get a so-called a rentista. It's also called a digital nomad or a remote worker visa. The way this works is you have to demonstrate with some kind of receipts that you, or bank statement, that you made a certain amount, 24,000 US dollars is a common amount, in the last year through remote work. If you can demonstrate that, then they're willing to give you a permanent resident visa, subject to you only being able to work for employers who are outside the country. The basic idea is countries are much more rich. Your parents, if your parents are supportive, then honestly, just going someplace where you can lower the burden of that for them would work. Great. Well, if they see the danger, then I would say if I had a child who was graduating high school soon, I would send my child off to either to an educational program, basically get enrolled someplace safe, or simply go someplace where the living is cheap. Because, for example, like I say, the median income in the Philippines is is 440 US dollars a month. So you could live there and figure out something to do online. For example, you could take a course to do and learn to do something like computer-aided drafting or graphic arts, and then you could do that online, make a living for yourself, and kind of get a life started. Another possibility, if your parents were planning on supporting you getting into college, is you might look into getting into college in a place like South America, like consider Brazil or Argentina for college. So I would say talk to me. Come to the office hours, and we can strategize this. Your situation's just a little unusual, but there are a lot of ways, especially if you can bring your parents. Love to talk with you and your parents about ways they could support you. Okay. All right. There are a few ways you can get citizenship. Rich, you mentioned citizenship by descent. If you have parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, or great-great-grandparents in the who are from someplace else, then you may be eligible for citizenship somewhere. We're lucky to have somebody who's a specialist in this field, who's a volunteer on our staff. And if you believe that you might be in this situation, write to us and ask for a citizenship consult, and we will help you figure out if you can. I believe we talked about this. I'm not going to go back to it, but it does kind of apply to both of you, I think, is you can just knock around, and millions of hippies have done it over the years. So, hey. All right, one more way of kind of getting through this. Something I call border life. Basically, instead of leaving the United States, move to Tacoma, Bellingham, or San Diego, Buffalo. Move somewhere near the border. Start making contacts and friends over on the other side of the border, and at some point probably you'll end up with, like, somebody will say, hey, they're hiring at so and so, and you'll be able to get a job in Canada and get over the border. You can move to Canada, live in Canada, and officially be living in the U.S. You have up to 6 months on a tourist visa, and if you keep an official address, which could just be one of those private post office places in the U.S., and your bank is in the U.S., you can effectively be living in Canada and apparently be living in the U.S. I would suggest that you kind of come back and forth. Don't go for 6 months and then 2 days before the end of it, come back for 48 hours and then go again, because the customs people will definitely say, hey, you're actually living in Canada. But if you go back and forth at kind of irregular intervals, and if they ask you why, you say, well, I have somebody I'm in a relationship with over there, then they probably don't care. Especially if you can make it look like you've got some income in the United States. And if you're working remotely, that definitely can be done. You just have clients pay you into your U.S. account. Similarly, if, for example, you are running a cottage industry, you can do it in Canada, haul everything over the border, and then ship it out from the United States. But as long as it doesn't look like you're living in Canada and working without a permit, you'll be fine. Okay, there are a few ways that I want to caution you don't work. First is that asylum, the conditions to be granted asylum anywhere really don't apply to the United States. You can always go apply for asylum in the same sense that you can always go sue anyone for almost anything, but you're not going to prevail. You're not going to, all you're doing is volunteering for a prison sentence for a while. So, asylum requires that you be at risk of death, torture, serious bodily injury, extended imprisonment, or conditions intolerable to life if returned to your own country. And there are a bunch of other conditions as well that you just simply aren't going to make. Another thing you should avoid doing is if you are somewhere and they say you have to leave after 6 months, actually leave. Otherwise, you're going to get a stamp that says you overstayed in your passport, and that's going to make it harder to get into the next place. So, particularly if you're doing the traveling around thing, follow the rules. And finally, if you're we sure encourage people to help each other in this time, but do not try to help a minor. Do not try and help anyone under 18 to move. If you do that, you can be charged with child trafficking, which carries something like a 10 or a 15-year prison term. So be very aware of the age of anyone you are attempting to help. Yep. Rich, if you can, if you'd like to set up a time to talk with your parents, I'd be happy to do that. Because I suspect that they probably are not certain what they can do to help you at a time like this. So drop me an email. I'm Annie at Transrescue. Hang on, I'll put that in the chat. Yeah. All right. Okay. Few issues you have to struggle with. You may have some commitments in the U.S. You are going to have to figure out what you do with your possessions. I will tell you that shipping anything overseas almost always is a bad move. I went from being half owner of an engineering works and having something like 40 tons of industrial machinery to my life fitting in a carry-on in a single check bag. Disability is an issue. Talk to us if that's an issue for you. And and you're going to have to figure out what to do for money. So it does take some money to get out, but not much. My favorite party trick is having somebody tell me how much money they've got, and I suggest ways they can get out. So, okay, this is actually the end of things. If you have questions, we've got a hotline for questions, and feel free to use that hotline. We're a bit early. Are there questions before we go? That's the end of my presentation. We're always around. We have office hours a couple of times a week. It's down to about once a week, where you can drop in and ask questions and just talk to us. There's no presentation. It's just a Google Meet. You can also just drop us something on email. And we'll be happy to help you. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think at this point, I'll say good night. And, okay, hang on. Sandy has a question. Okay, Sandy, what's your question? YouTube might be deleting. Okay. Yeah, maybe it is because I'm not seeing a question. I'm not seeing your question. Canceling your passport. Okay, what was your question? Because I did not see a question from you about canceling your passport. Is Trump likely to cancel passports? It's a possibility. If that happens, you definitely want to be outside the country. You do not want to be trapped in the country without a passport. Was that your question? Yeah, if you're outside the country, you still have the physical document. Don't lose it. I don't think they're likely to cancel passports. J.D. Vance has a bill on his website that discontinues the issuance of X passports. What happens when it's canceled? Well, a passport is a letter from your government saying, in the old days, if you found somebody who wasn't your citizen in your country, the king could kill them with no consequences. So when people traveled abroad, they started going to their king and getting a letter from their king saying, please don't kill this person if you find them in your country. They're going to come to your country for this and that purpose. So that's how passports got started. So it's a letter from the king saying, this person's our citizen, don't harm them. And if that gets canceled, then you are a person who, without a benefit of travel documents, which is effectively a stateless person. And there's a theoretical difference, but effectively you become a stateless person. I know a bunch of people who are in that position for various reasons from various countries. And that really limits your ability to travel around. So if you think it's going to happen, be sure you are wherever you want to remain. On the other hand, if your passport is canceled, that is a tremendously good demonstration that you cannot avail yourself of the aid and protection of your home country, and at that point you probably can apply for asylum. But you need to be outside the country when it's canceled. If you're in the USA, you're stuck. Okay? It's a bit of a gray area. Passports rarely get canceled. It's considered dirty pool to cancel passports, but with Trump, we never know. Okay, any other questions? If not, I'm going to call this. Okay. Thank you. I'll see you back online.